Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
Hey, church, baby, I'm back. And if you think I can't dance now, man, just watch my act.
Welcome back to The Law Show here on CIL 650. We're talking about, well, after the longest election campaign in the history of the country, lots of changes going on at all sorts of government levels. And we're here to tackle the immigration and citizenship aspect of some of the changes that might be coming down in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Our guests are Alex Stojicevic and Rudy Kischer. The firm is Maynard, Kischer, Stojicevic. They are immigration and citizenship lawyers, both along with Gordon, of course, in Vancouver, downtown at 1168 Hamilton Street. We talked about the promises made by some of the players in this long election campaign, touching on, among other things, the refugee crisis coming out of the Middle East and how they might move to honor some of those commitments they made. One of the, and I said that one of the things that it was probably the only immigration and citizenship matter that received any attention during the election campaign. And Alex very quickly pounced on me and said, except for that little matter of the face covering. That's not technically a citizenship and immigration issue, is it, Alex? But of course, it was code for citizenship and immigration issues.
Yeah, it's really, when you look at it, it's more of a religious rights issue, but it goes back to who are the people we are letting in and how are they fitting in. And I think it's important to look at that issue to remind people what it was about. So the face covering is called the niqab, right?
Right, yeah.
And what had happened is a woman had applied for citizenship, met all the criteria, so she was in Canada enough, spoke English to a level that was acceptable, did the knowledge test, so had the correct, met all the qualifications under the Act. There was a directive sent out by the department, so it's not a law.
Right.
It's not a regulation. It wasn't voted on by Parliament. It was a directive sent out by the minister saying that anybody wanting to take the oath, which is a necessary part of the entire citizenship process.
Sure.
So at the end of, and every Canada Day, there is usually a news clip on that where you see everybody standing in a room and the citizenship judge presiding over a swearing-in ceremony.
And we had that conversation this year, earlier after Canada Day.
Exactly. It's
on
a beautiful.
show.
We all feel proud that Canada is a welcoming and tolerant nation. And into the regulations is written a provision that at a citizenship ceremony, the greatest degree of leniency towards religious freedom should be exercised. So, you are entitled at a citizenship ceremony to bring in your holy book of choice.
Sure.
So it doesn't have to be the Bible, and for so people can bring in a Quran if they'd like to swear on that. Afterwards, there was a time period where the Gideon Society used to actually stand outside of a citizenship ceremony and give out free Bibles. That was stopped after a movement, an application by people that were concerned that was sort of putting too much pressure on people, so that they've stopped
That's gone, right.
But you're allowed to bring in your own holy book.
Sure.
And people are allowed to wear, turbans, etc. But the government felt that you had to show your face. Now, it's important, and I think, sometimes people miss the point, is the woman who was swearing in, doing the swearing-in ceremony, she has already been identified by an officer.
Right.
Right?
It was acknowledged that she had revealed her face to an official for appropriate identification purposes.
Exactly. So identity clearly is not an issue, right? So the minister, what you saw here, I think, was the Conservatives sort of, trying to find a wedge issue. And if you look at the way this case went forward, it's interesting that that the appeal, the decision came down, and the decision to appeal the decision came down in the heart of the election.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that was an accident. I think the Conservatives are a little, are very sort of. They're chess players in this game, and I think they saw it coming, and they put that to be a heart in the middle of the election campaign. And I don't think it served them the way they thought it would.
Okay. So, and because the federal court ruled that the ministerial directive was wrong.
Yes.
She had every right in the world to cover her face, provided she adhered to the rules and allowed immigration officials to see her face and check the box. Yeah, it's her.
And what the judge said was very limited. What it said was basically, maybe you want to make regulations on this, but you haven't made any regulations. So, it's really a sort of an administrative law point, and it might be a little bit boring to go over this a little bit, but really what the judge is taking a look like, were you fair in the way you did this?
Right, yeah.
Right? And if you take a look at the fairness, the regulations don't provide for this. They provide for religious freedom. And if the government wants to change something, they got to go back and change the rules.
And it's not in the least bit boring. It's the law show, my friend. And how judges arrive at decisions is critical to understanding the law and being able to appreciate what we have in Canada.
I know this is not really to do with the election per se, but it is important for a moment that your listeners appreciate that the oath is something that has been litigated now quite a bit in the last few years.
The actual wording of the oath.
Yeah,
that's correct.
The oath is to the Queen.
Yes.
And it has been found constitutionally sound. There was a challenge by multiple group of people, one fellow who was an Irish Republican who refused to take citizenship because to him the Queen is a symbol of oppression. A fellow who is self-identified as Rastafarian who took the same position, that this is a colonial anachronism, and as someone of West Indian origin, he refuses categorically to acknowledge the Queen's sovereignty. This has been challenged in court, and the court has put this to bed.
Right.
You're not swearing an oath to the Queen, really. You're swearing an oath to the Queen in her role as the symbolic head of the Canadian
country.
state. So you are
Absolutely.
swearing to Canada.
Yes.
That's what you're actually swearing to.
Right.
And the courts have now ruled on this. So the oath itself, which I think some people have lost a bit of the sense of, it's something that, those of us who were born in Canada, I'm born in Canada, we never had to swear an oath to Canada, but it is for people, if you know somebody who is going to a citizenship ceremony, it is actually a very it's actually a very warm and impressive ceremony. The judges really do a good job.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
People go, people bring their families, everybody all together swears their oath, and it is one of the great ways that we come together in Canada. And I would really encourage anybody who knows someone who's going for their citizenship ceremony to go with them, because it's a great experience.
That's a great suggestion, and it really is quite a moving moment. It only takes a matter of a half an hour. It's always on a holiday. It's July 1st if you get a good one, and it's just a great, great occasion.
Well, it is, and it's something that when you see the face of newcomers, some of whom have waited a long time for this, to see how much it matters to them, it's hard not to be inspired by it.
Okay, so let me on the heels of this discussion, let me just put this to you. This is a story. This is an ad in a newspaper I read a couple of days ago. Okay, I just thought I would print it off and bring it to you. This is the story of one of those people who would probably do just about anything to be in one of those immigration ceremonies we've just talked about. This is from a hotel here on the West Coast. And it's an ad. I got it in my inbox. They went to go stay at their hotel. But as part of the package, there was this thing about the Employee of the Month. And it says, meet Mike. He's our 5-star Employee of the Month as voted by guests. And it goes on to talk about what a helpful, can-do, smiley face kind of upbeat guy he is and what a terrific teammate he is. He's worked in the hospitality industry, including 3 years in Saudi Arabia. He has a natural way with guests. He's good at what he does. But the real inspiration behind his smile and his attitude, gentlemen, is his 2-year-old son back home in the Philippines. And here's the last paragraph of the article. Michael has lots of cool hobbies and says he'd love to be a firefighter someday. But his big dream is to become a Canadian resident and bring his son home. So, thinking warm thoughts about those wonderful immigration ceremonies that we've just talked about, how realistic is Michael's dream to become a Canadian resident and bring that little boy here?
I was going to say firefighter. That hasn't been a really high-growth job in the last decade, has it? I mean,
I'd hate to be the guy with the pin in the balloon. If somebody
are you
like
talking immigration or firefighting? Both.
Both. I mean, when somebody, and we have people in this situation that come to our office and employers, and it's heartbreaking. You have to look at them and say, at your current job, the chances of you immigrating are probably, given the priorities of the BCP that have changed, I would say very slim, depending on where this. So this is a.
Let me just stop you because the BCP&P, that's jargon, and it means the
BC Provincial Nominee Program. So it's a program. So
this is the temporary foreign workers,
so
right?
We'll take a step back here. For people to immigrate to Canada, there is a provincial system that allows people to immigrate or lets them get nominated and gives them a pathway to immigration. And then there's the federal system. And the federal system has always focused on what we call skilled work.
Sure,
right?
Yep.
So that's a traditional avenue that the government, the Canadians have been very comfortable with people immigrating. And the reason that we feel we do better perhaps at integration than maybe European countries is when we select immigrants, we tend to select people that have the potential to go into a skilled level job, right? So they're going to be working and maybe being rewarded at above the Canadian average in terms of income.
Okay.
When I take a look at this gentleman's situation, the problem we have is there has been a program that's opened up for probably the last 10 years that has allowed people to come in semi-skilled positions and work in Canada without permanent residency.
Okay.
So this is new, really very new to the Canadian environment, in the sense when I say new, maybe the last 10 years. And what has happened in the provincial system has allowed it to nominate certain people that could qualify for immigration, a set number, only 5,000 every year. And then out of this amount, I would say probably about 1,000 a year can come in under this hospitality program.
Okay.
So there was a program that he could fit under.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that program has gotten really full. And now the government has, in Alberta, for example, where they have a similar program like the provincial nominee program, they take about 5,000 people a year in total. They have a 10,000 person backlog. So they've closed their program. They have all the people standing in line they need for 2 years.
Okay.
BC is in a similar circumstance. They've now closed their program. They're going to reopen it sometime in January. We don't really know what percentage. They're saying they're going to keep a hospitality program. But right now, could this person apply for immigration today?
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Really?
Wouldn't qualify.
But
Very
this
difficult.
is the way it's always been done in Canada. We are a nation of immigrants. Our parents and grandparents came over here without much. Yeah. And they got a little piece of land in some cases. Yeah. They got permission to go to work in others, and not a lot of permission beyond that.
But Sterling,
and made a life for themselves.
With respect, no, that's not actually true. What you just said is, however, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
But it's in terms of the immigrants, the young people coming in, given the model that's existed in this country for 100 or more years, why wouldn't they be convinced that if generations preceding me have been able to do it, why isn't it my turn?
Well, because it's not how things were working in the 100 years before, Sterling. How things used to work is your parents came to Canada with a status in hand, most of them. And with that status in hand, they chose what jobs were appropriate or not amongst the ones that were available.
Okay.
What has happened in the last 15 or 20 years is that we have started to fill temporary work positions with temporary foreign workers who do not have permanent resident status when they arrive.
And do they understand that clearly from day one?
That's a different issue. Some do, some
don't.
That's
the story that I get out of
this.
This guy doesn't have a clue.
The challenge that we have is that we've never done it that way. We've only started to do it in the last 10 or 15 years. And when there's pushback politically, like there was last summer with the McDonald's incident or the Tim Hortons case, where people feel that Canadian jobs are going to foreigners, the government tends to feel that pressure and tighten rules. This gentleman is also facing a 4-year limit on his work permit. That's all he can work here. Since April of 2015, there's been a 4-year limit. So he can work for your for the West Coast resort that sent this to you for 4 years, but that's it. Then he has to go home. So the resort has to either find a solution, or he has to find a solution.
Right.
And the challenge that we have is that in going to a labor capital model for immigration, which is what we've done in the last decade, the challenge that we have with that model is what happens to the workers when there's a downturn. The workers have come to Canada with the hope of exactly what you said earlier.
Right.
The hope has remained the same.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That hasn't changed. What's changed is their ability to do that is different than it was.
The rules.
The rules.
Yeah.
And the comment that we often, we're taking this from Don Dvoritz, who's a professor at Simon Fraser University.
I know Don.
There's nothing more permanent than a temporary foreign worker. These people have the hopes and aspirations of staying.
Yes.
They've been given a foot in the door and the promise of a pathway. But when that pathway closes for reasons that have nothing to do with decisions they've made, then they're put in a tough position, and Canada's put in a tough position.
Right.
And this is something that the next government will have to tackle. Do we continue with this labor capital model? The old model, the one that looked at human capital, which was the system that existed prior to 10 years ago, this did not put a focus on foreign workers. It put a emphasis generally on skills. So we're not going to choose you based on if you can fit into the workforce now. We're going to choose you based on your ability to find work in different types of scenarios.
Right.
That has been abandoned as being not precise enough for our labor market needs. But that was abandoned at a time when resources prices were high, unemployment was low.
Right.
What happens now when resource prices are low and unemployment's starting to creep up? This is the challenge policymakers will have to deal with going forward.
Well, we need to, I'm sorry, really, I need to take a quick break. We'll pick right up on this again, though. We're talking, well, a lot of immigration and citizenship issues in the wake of a long and colorful election campaign. It's The Law Show on CIL 650 with lots more still ahead after this.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CIL 650.